I do like coming back to the variability of the world again and again and seeing it without self and also with the factor of out of controlness, which is an ultimate reality. Like we tend to think in terms of normalcy, and then we tend to think that things are improbable, and then we tend to be completely surprised when it happens to us. Like you see these people that when a hurricane comes, they thought the house was solid, that it was not going to disappear in the course of minutes. And yet, in many ways, it's a metaphor for our lives. Our lives, there's no guarantees. There is out of controlness all around us all the time. Now, some people, they would think, oh, this turns me into a neurotic. I'm going to let all the bad possibilities bubble up and focus morosely on those, when in fact you can let those go and then see the effervescence of the moment, the satori of the moment, of awakening again and again and again. Just that, like crisp champagne, but without the champagne, just the bubbles, the iridescence of it, the light iridescence of joy. And to slow down the cognition on the good thoughts and the good vibes, the good feelings, the good space of nothing at all. Just everything that is gone, that was junking up your mind state. And you contract your muscles on things, and you contract your hand on things, and then you also learn how to release the hand. Let anything you were holding on to go. Here's this bad memory again. There's different. Think of the thoughts like they're different frequency of bubbles and also frequency in potency. Like there's slow, big bubbles that pop with all this sting. And then there's just the little bubbles that keep like floating up out of like a little crevice. Just beep, 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 very, very subtle. And yet going all the time, just bubbling in the background. You see the difference, the qualitative difference of those things? Well, the same is with your thoughts. And a lot of it has to do with out of controlness. Why did you think of that just right now? When you hear the ding, what do you feel now? So you can go back and forth. You can learn how to release bad thoughts and also the persistent, subtle thoughts. But those are, you have to sometimes wait and observe the water for some time. Maybe the water is very still. But then, blub, there's a thought. And then you just let it go. You just watch the process happening in a context of not being irritated by anything because you have reasonable irritant-free space to decompress. Nobody's judging you. You're not judging yourself. You're not engaged in self-criticism. You're not engaged in remembering, reliving, thinking, obsessing, any of that at all. You can see that happening, but you can also relax the process. Sometimes you'll get it completely right the whole time. That's what you can consider a good session. Other times you go into it, you fly out of it. It's too, especially in the beginning and the unskilled times where, especially if you're doing this in response to an injury, that it's sort of you're playing catch up here and not in a good state of mind. It's like someone who's sick, who's really looking for some type of different remedy. And then you'll be like, this isn't working fast enough, and then you'll abandon it type of person. Instead of the advantage that truly practicing societies have had, at least in varying degrees of excellence over the courses of the centuries, And the very good ones were very effective and blunt, oftentimes not convoluted, not over intellectualized, which is the Western predilection coming from psychoanalysis to be one of those people. And there's people that have read thousands of books. Like you just look, and they've written dozens of books, and they're sort of stuck in that process of knowledge acquisition and status. And so their practice is hindered. They also are weighed down by a lot of self. A lot of Westerners have big selves. And then they'll be the most humble people. Oh no, it's not me, it's you. Your whole concept of self, your encrusted personalities. To put it in a gentle way, think of it like crustaceans. You can have skin encrusted on the bottom of your feet right now, but because you weren't in a practice of high bodily hygiene, which I recommend, you wouldn't have caught it. It would just accumulate. How many people have washed behind their ears recently, religiously? And if you do that, you get the gunk. There's not going to be a health problem or some type of spreading fungus, and you're not going to be itching and irritated about a lot of things because you just have good mental hygiene. People have good dental hygiene, they don't have cavities, and the breath doesn't stink. But it's not natural. They're taking a extra effort, extra good effort, but not overdoing it either till their gums are bleeding. It's not clean enough, I gotta get it. There's a crack side. No, good enough is good enough. Now, once a day might not be good enough. After you eat, doing it that way. And then maybe just because there might be something in the air or something, there's some causality, some type of karma that is involved in requiring maybe 2 times a day brushing your teeth, or 3 or 4, depending on maybe you have an injury that needs special application of attention so that it heals properly. Maybe that time frame of healing isn't predeterminate. In fact, if it gets infected again, it might just kill you, even though you half healed it in a half-assed practice that got stunted in some way, and you were not able to break through the barrier in a Ganeshian way. That final barrier that keeps people stuck in a world of hurt. But some people come close, they keep coming closer, they get close, and then they give themselves a lot of tries. Like they keep, I'm just going to play this till the end. I'm going to keep, not overdoing it, just playing around like this way. This time I got blocked by this, then I got blocked by that, then I blocked myself this way. And you see it more in a playful way. It's not really about winning, it's how you're playing, how you're experiencing, how you're interacting with the variables. And if you got a lot of bad variables, well, it is skillful to get away from them. It's not necessarily skillful to confront variables that are perhaps impossible to solve. But that requires you realizing we don't live in a perfect world. We just don't. Little kittens die. It's terrible. But it happens. It's part of life. Like, many kittens don't die. Many kittens live to 25 years and do a lot of stuff that might not be quite satisfactory for the neighbor that doesn't even know the damn cat, but it's always doing its business in their ornamental shrubberies. And if there's not a way of communicating that effectively and seeing things from his side, not just from your side, but also seeing things from the cat side, that you can come to an amicable conclusion to irritating things that are subsidiary to the things themselves. So that's good governance between neighbors, that's good governance within yourself. So the other thing is we were trained to be overproductive. So an overproduction, overdoing it, is not sustainable. But again, they didn't really value our sustainability. But as compassionate people, you should start having some compassion for yourself and reforming the ratcheting down the amount of time you're engaging in activities of any kind, including consuming media of any kind, any type of mental stimulation, also gaming of any kind, any watching monitors of any kind. And if you do interact with monitors, being very focused about, okay, I'm going to do this and that's it, and I'm going to give myself this amount of time. If you have a weakness for it, and I know a lot of young people do, so it does help to help themselves wean themselves off of things which would otherwise be quite stimulating, to the point that as creatures that are drawn to stimulation, that we could be overstimulated, just like we're overdoing, overproducing. And so you can switch from overproducing to being overstimulated, or do both at the same time, and the result of that is burning yourself out. It's deleterious, it's overestimating the amount of reserves you have. So, and again, whatever social dynamic that is behind that type of training happening was just a period of its time. This time there are different wrong ways of seeing and doing things. But in general, you should have a life style, specifically in the later stages of life. I think younger people it might even help them to be active in a lot of instances. They've got a lot more energy. But on the other hand, confronting them with techniques that can help them in youth can also help them later in life as well, as they develop over time and become more skillful. So burning up all their time with activities is not the way to go. You need to reduce the amount of time that are engaged in any type of activities, especially social ones. And social ones need to be curated for, if they're engaged in at all, for good times, good vibe. And the thing that is the stated purpose of the thing is actually the thing that's being carried out, and not some type of political agenda that is toxic. So a lot of people don't want to be recognized or described or defined as toxic, so that's the problem. So, but again, cause and effect, you do the results, you check the AstroTurf. What's being AstroTurf? There it is. That's really the only thing you need to deal with. But they're going to want to derail that process by focusing on fetish issues that are irrelevant for the purpose of agitation, and distraction, deflection, derailment, however you want to call it. So again, there's people invested in this, and then that are emotionally invested and are useful idiots without realizing it. And then there's the real players. So make that distinction. But certainly the people that are role playing, these toxic roles are not in any way not dangerous. So that's the way it should be seen. Now they'll say, no, they're not. Oh, of course not. I'm just an idealist. So yeah, sure. Where's that idealism headed? Gotta be real careful about that. That's something that Christian societies did look at, and now that's mischaracterized as just being a completely retrograde nonsense hooey, but in fact it wasn't. There were all different types of people that believed in all different types of crazy, screwy things in the Middle Ages. You had, I don't want to single them out necessarily, but the Vikings, these were men that were building ships with axes and engaged in international trade. And sometimes they fell on some bad times and didn't have enough to eat in foreign places, and so went on raiding parties and stuff like that. That led to some predacious outcomes. Now, in other cases, it led to expansion. These are fringe issues, so you don't want to typify a whole culture as being something overly something, when in fact you have to look at it holistically. Once modernity came along and solved a bunch of problems, then you didn't have raiding parties roaming the countryside, because again, maybe their need to have something to eat or take something didn't outweigh the importance of the person or persons that got raided. And so we seem to have lost that perspective, which is unbelievable. Like, there's so many things that you can't think that people could forget that are basic as that, but apparently it's been erased from modern socialization, when it should be reinstated, that there should be a little bit more skepticism so about crazy idealistic astroturf movements. So yeah, just imagine if there was like a very evil person somewhere in the how do we want to call it, Mesopotamia, and they wanted to mess your people up, and they sent a bunch of people that pretended to be reed cutters and in fact were headhunters. But they didn't commit like direct violence, they committed indirect violence for the purpose of sabotage, so that they have a cover story, but they're in on the tape type people. And that they're the ones that are really interested in politics, social movements, religions, and textbooks, and just all these things you wouldn't think a bad person would be interested in. They are just overly focused with, obsessed with, you could say. Murdering the thing they love. So, but just because such people exist doesn't mean they should be tolerated. In good times, the people aren't tolerated. They don't make social ascendancy. They're socially descendant, not ascendant. So in our time, we've experienced this drastic flipping in which were a lot of previously good areas. So this is the historical context in which we live, not because we want to, but because it does exist. It's happened before, and it can happen again, or it can get just critically worse, and then the whole thing blows up anyway. Really, it depends. If you look at old kings, and if you think that the new type of people that can be influential like they were are existent today with the things they have, it really does make you wonder if it's more realistic to be pessimistic than optimistic. Certainly at this point in time with these demographic results. With ego or not, heedlessness is what the Buddha warned of, which which is why it is not wise to be heedless. So it's very understandable to not want to be suffering as much as you are, and that perhaps that was even the first method that you came up with for trying to make what would otherwise be lethal suffering mildly acceptable. So I think this is also a misperception. Like, people that are using drugs are in such a state of suffering a lot of times, or misguidance. I mean, it starts off a lot less serious than one thinks. But the longer one lives, the more one is exposed to out of controlness, and also a lot of unskillful behavior, as well as one's own unskillful reaction to unskillful behavior, and on and on and on. So it's understandable. A compassionate person like a doctor, just imagine, I like doctors on a certain level, because they'll say, okay, so you have they'll diagnose, if they're a good doctor, truthfully your condition. Say, look, I got the blood sample, I got the data, and it is this, even if it doesn't appear to be that. And I've seen it before in different situations that were also somewhat unclear, and I prescribed this, and it worked great, and the patients survived. And the goodness of the therapy is really in development. It's like software. You want to solve this problem, but you need to try out maybe 1,000, 100,000, 1,000,000 things until you come to the best treatment. And even then, there's sometimes a differential, because your genetic makeup is different than the average. And so you have to be able to take these types of variables into account, so that finally the cure is a very sophisticated combination of variables that are specifically tailored to you, because they have to be. If one variable is wrong for you, it's not going to work. So, but it's a complex process, and now you know, like, potential variables. So now it's about refinement and dedication to the research. You have right effort, you have right determination, you have right patience, you have right view. And not all of those are given. In fact, that's all super normal, but you can work on each one simultaneously, because there's really no other way of doing it. And yet, your level of mastery really does depend on that, finally. But it's not mine, it's not yours. It's not you, it's not yours. It's not me, it's not mine. So it really is up to each individual practitioner. It's like teaching people how to climb sheer rock faces. So look, we've come out with these best techniques, but theory and practice are two completely different things, and weather is a gigantic variable. Your physical health is a gigantic variable. You might be able to function perfectly well at 19 years old in a high altitude environment, but at 33, no. You lose 40% of your cognitive capabilities in those types of environments, and then you start doing a lot of stupid things that you wouldn't have done at 19. And even if you did, you would be able to better recover, because you're also a biological organism, which has a infinite number of deviations, and also possible problems associated with cell structures, DNA, chromosomes, everything. Just we're talking almost on a subatomic level. any type of variance can lead to disastrous results. And yet, think of this life as one iteration in potentially infinite number of lives. Whether you're ascending or descending, I would not recommend the hell realms at all, ever. In fact, it's like falling off a cliff face. It's predictable the amount of suffering you can have, and so I'm all about double and triple and quadruple safety. So all of us have to climb. Every life we're in is not a bubble. There's no securities. Now, it's great when we have favorable conditions, and you know what that is? That's karma. It has nothing to do. I mean, there's a certain causality in it. And again, the causality of ascendant principles is irrefutable. But it's not necessarily completely transparent when all the things are transpiring in the moment. You can only, perhaps if you do the psychoanalysis, which I don't recommend, certainly not for average people, but for those that, for whatever karmic reasons, were given the trajectory to be the academic monk, the scholarly monk, which is a special, believe me, excruciating type of suffering. Something that is beyond every Paducana's imagination. It's a fate that either very foolish or very holy people are the only ones that would choose it. And yet that too is karma, is it not? If we take a grander theory of reoccurrence, of rebirth, just because we've been given a lot of practical explanations for our existence on this planet, in this cosmos, that we very little understand, doesn't mean they're true. If you look out on the galaxies out there and then you consider us a life form, what is the chance that there's life just like us, just like stardust, living on some planet somewhere, going through these spiritual resiliences? So that, yes, we start at a baseline where we can't go any lower than zero. So we accept zero and integrate it into our practice, which also helps us with no self. What is that big word? We say no, and then we say self, but what is no? Think of the most complete dispassionate no you can possibly think of. Something like that, and then to infinity. There is no craving, there is no suffering, there's no disappointment in the no. Will you live forever? No. Okay, the finality of that is just, it's really the difference between a weak person and a strong person. The strong person says, okay, that is the answer, that's the truth. I will live with that truth. I will make myself aware of that truth. I will renew my awareness of that truth every chance I get in order to heighten the indescribable generosity that even living 1 second in this realm represents. In its entirety, if you were just to look at the universe instead of that fraction of a second in which you are irritated, which you're distracted from the cosmic occurrence, even our enemies, especially our enemies. What fabulously, indescribably valuable teachers in every regard, finally, when you break through the barrier from disappointment to a gratitude, and then experience the infinity of gratitude by doing that, by letting them go, letting yourself go, being grudge free, being right here, right now. Just a short comment coming back to billionaires, like as a caste, as actors, socio-political, economic actors that just came out of nowhere. We have one recent concrete example. So Musk, right? Musk has created a personality cult for himself. So he's got all the PR that money can buy, making him look like a total genius. While he gets into critical industries of national security, including the information space, if you think of Twitter like that. But of course, there's Facebook, there's these other billionaires involved in that game. And of course, you present people bad information, or you present them lopsided information or spun information, and you let certain Leninist activist groups run rampant on your platforms while you're censoring people trying to get the truth out there. That has major detrimental political, socioeconomic effects downstream. Just unquantifiably bad. But be that as it may, it's recently come up. See, the facade is starting to fall on him, but him personally, again, I don't consider any one personality really significant. I use them all as just abstractions. But it came out that he botched or threw a monkey wrench into the Ukrainian situation just because he got like a phone call from somebody who threatened him, or he got scared, so he decided that he was gonna not let certain things happen on his network, leading to potentially hundreds or thousands of deaths. So, or perhaps even eventually losing a war where you're enslaved in captivity for 100 years, because it's not like that hasn't happened in that region in modern times. But of course, he's providing a service. Like, he's doing, like, let's say 90% of what he should be doing. But that 10% could be critical. But because he's the personality in charge, and because he's such an individual, he's just going to throw it because that he thought it was the right thing to do. But this man has not been elected. This man, again, his financing, his whole story might not check out under scrutiny. But against a monolithic wall of propaganda and public relations and who knows what else, how much personal info you're going to get on somebody like a Prigozhin? He's another one. Was he a billionaire? No, maybe he was just a millionaire. He was trying to get there. So story doesn't check out, involved in all different types of industries, and just operating with impunity. Not voted out of office either. So if he gets continuously more crazy, like someone like Putin, you give somebody that type of environment and give them 30 years, they're raving lunatics at that point. But then again, we're thinking, we need to think for a second. Putin is the leader, the crazy leader of the biggest country on earth. Well, what about the biggest company? The biggest company is a global operation. It doesn't stop at the borders. So just think how much negative influence crazy people like that can have. Well, that's a theory now, but it's actually probably practice too. We just don't know because Putin's a political figure as much as a bad actor that he might be. He does get a lot of scrutiny. These other people, we don't know their names. 171 in the UK alone, we don't know them. No way to vote them out. And they're involved majorly in compromising national security, which means the security of everybody's lives, the functioning of the political system as a whole, the information landscape. Am I underestimating or overestimating the threat, do you think? I would say I'm vastly underestimating it. But it sounds alarmist to somebody who's been put to sleep and lullabied by nonsensical information environments and non-functioning regulatory, national regulatory agencies, let alone international regulatory agencies. Interpol's busted, just like World Health Organization busted. Two institutions that have become politicized in a bad way. Again, maybe they're performing 80 or 90% of their functions, but that 10%, 20%, that's critical. That's deterministic, that's strategic. Things don't get better. It grows. So then it goes from 1 year from doing 80% to 70 to 60 to 30 to, they'll arrest people for a bribe type of institution because they've been gutted out, hollowed out on their values, practically. Theoretically, from the facade, from the brand, from appearances, they're the same as they ever was. Maybe that story doesn't make it on Z or whatever the platform will be renamed. All different types of things, but certainly a gray spectrum of legality and illegality. So, but of course, these are just assumptions, but the really cool thing is for scientists, like forensic scientists, when you're looking at a dead body, A, the person is dead. B, you can more or less ascertain whether or not they died of natural causes. And we can do that with the data, forensic analysis of catastrophic social situations. We can tie that back to them. They automatically get the credit for that, for being the top of a mismanaged system. They took the responsibility. They will experience, if not in this lifetime, certainly in the lifetimes to come, but certainly in the public forum, they get the responsibility for that because the buck stops with them. It does. It does stop somewhere. So they got the whole shell game thing going on. Like, no, it wasn't me, it was him. It was all of them. It needs to be re-architected. And there does need to be forensic analysis done into it. And there does need to be prosecutions. These crimes. On a whole different, unimaginable scale. So what the punishment for that will be needs to be on a different scale as well. Crime and punishment, right? The punishment should fit the crime. That's what justice means. Now I'm talking about justice in a material sense, but of course the spiritual sense there will be justice whether there's material justice or not. But it's really a good time and a great thing when the two coincide at certain random periods, perhaps in the near future. Perhaps it's a decade away, but at least you now know what you're dealing with. Oh, so the other thing is he came out on a political position. He said, oh yeah, Taiwan, that's always been China. So 24 million people, they don't they misunderstand how they see the world and themselves and the entire history of Chinese politics. They don't know, but the billionaire, he knows too that the communist Chinese are right. And oh, isn't it a coincidence that all of his permits to build warlike electronic battery factories and cars were approved by their autocratic regime? Isn't that a coincidence? I mean, maybe 100 other people didn't get that permission, but he did, because he's number one. He's really good at what he does. He's a shining example for Patuginos around the world of what success looks like. Is that right? Is that what we're led to believe? So that's two, 3 strikes, 4 strikes. I mean, PayPal was a strike way back when, because they were highly politicized from day one, which caused untold disaster, which is part of the social disaster, the informational disaster, cultural disaster, financial disaster. So, but again, it brings me back to, okay, how many of these actors have companies, which is, say, shells, and then how many of these companies are implementing cultural policies which are antithetical to Western civilization? And what type of pushback does anyone have in that confluence of globality, capital, and culture? Well, we're in unknown waters at this point. How bad can the system get? Well, you can see it in certain corporate cultures. And these companies, they have major significant influence in all different types of things. People's livelihoods, what is produced, how, where, etc., etc. All that stuff is very influential, and yet there we have no oversight at all. Of course, the free market economy led to the most evolutionary outcomes that could possibly be imagined. That's what their Schillers, the people who show for them, that's the way they explain it. But the way an engineer looks at it is they look at the outcome, which is pure radioactive toxic garbage, and they reverse engineer where it's coming from. And if it's coming out the pipes, then the people who own the infrastructure of those pipes are guilty. They do bear the responsibility, and you do need to get rid of them. Like, now, in a civilized way, you would think, all right, we'll just vote these people out. But there's a question, you need to vet the new people too. Or maybe you do need to just demolish it and rebuild without that model. Maybe not. Maybe it is enough to clear out the management. And clear out the ownership, because first they buy the company, then they set the management. So you need to get rid of the managers and the owners. So now people would say, okay, how do you do that? Yeah, nationalize the ownership based on the corporate culture that they try to proliferate, which has been deemed to be the toxic nonsense that it is. So again, but all that's protected by wall legality. Well, just with the stroke of a pen, you can zap all that wall of legality out of the way. They like to write up little papers and do this and make this a little that. Well, you can do the same thing with all that garbage that they've produced. So certainly during the last 30 years of banditry, but going back before that. Again, to be on the safe side, 1912, that's the date in the U.S. Where it is in other countries, Who knows? In the UK, it could be a lot older than that. Might have to go back to, 1715, something like that. South Sea crisis, who knows? But that's certainly something, that would be a beneficial research project. But again, for beneficial things to happen and not be a stop, because that's certainly going to have some downsides for a lot of people that don't think they're in the wrong. In fact, they think they're in the right. Convince people that are funded up, capitalized up, securityed up, green men and women up. I mean, it could seem to be insurmountable, but maybe not. But these are certainly things that need to be looked into. He's not the only one idiot out there. It's just he had the temerity to start such a public relations campaign that he got publicly scrutinized in recent times. The other ones doing this crap, they're not being scrutinized, and yet they're doing it anyway. They've been doing it for years and decades. Nobody's been voting them out either, because that's not how the economy works, the political economy. It's not political because we say so, because we don't want any political consequences for our dastardly economic, which are finally political, decisions. So, yeah, it's real interesting. The global, seeing all the different factors at work. I mean, really, in comparison, Putin is a piker in comparison to some of these other Malthusian actors. Just a sad clown in comparison to globally corrosive institutions that, again, are manifold. There's if you go back to follow the ownership trail, how much do they own right now of economic infrastructure? And then the crappy corporate culture that's associated with that. That is exterminationist. So, good question. I don't know if there's too many people answering those types of questions right now. Not any that I know about. But that can change. That's the great thing about change. Things can change. We had a stupid, stinky 30 years of banditry, and my goodness, none of the bandits wanted it to happen, but there was just a thunderbolt and a flash of lightning, and then all of a sudden everything changed. And they're crappy, despotic, corrupt, self-deceived schemes went up in smoke. So this also brings me back to the malaise in the far Western culture that they've allowed to have happen, where you have corrupt cops letting criminals predate on citizens. That's sort of like the low-level attack. But there's, that's something that can only happen if they take out the political will at the top. So it's a pincher maneuver from top and bottom. And it's the people in the middle that get exterminated. So these are just, again, trends. I think right now, as far as Musk go, he's most likely going to retire one way or another, but he's not the beginning and he's not the end of the larger problem. And these types of things, these global institutions and the people behind them and the horrible culture that they now have, that needs to be taken a lot more seriously than it has. Especially the ownership, because that is the responsibility factor at work. Now, as far as Gabon, that was another funny story. So, Bongo, the Mbango family that's been running their autocracy for like the last, I don't know, 80 years or something. He got disposed by his security detail. Because finally, all these people, you think they're untouchable, but all of them, their whole lives are based on their security. So and the security are just goons. So the future of the world lies in the hands of goons. But for the time being, as long as the pay is okay, the maniacs of exterminationism are allowed to continue their invisible reign with invisible consequences. But yeah, Obango and Gabon. Now, it was funny because it's an entirely African nation, not one white face in the crowd. Gigantic country of enormous wealth, run into the ground by their political cronies. Yet not one white face in the crowd telling them how they needed to rule their country, or that the Gabonese culture needs to change to accommodate some parallel group of impoverished Europeans living there that the government needs to kowtow to and the culture needs to accommodate because they're there, because they're not there. But in the far west, where they've been using parallel societies and engaged in hybrid ethnic and criminal warfare, that type of baloney and blarney and numbnuttery is, it's not just normal, it's imposed from the top down to make for civic desertification. Because that's the result. But of course they don't claim that's the result. They claim they're bringing in a utopia by engaging in contrived, contradictory, and animosity creating social engineering. So again, always never forget the plausible deniability factor. If they can smoke you on something, sweet talk you on something, they will. But finally, just keep coming back to the results. Results are bad, then it's a smoke show. And there are sales. This is the side of sales that is the unethical side, selling people bad things. But it's a big part of it. Selling you bad things and telling you what you want to hear. Oh, this will make things better, when it's not. It just certain amounts of money and resources get siphoned off into certain parallel communities who, again, are completely closed off from the greater society that they live amongst. That they don't care if they get trashed. In fact, if they get trashed, then they have less political competition. So, and in a global context, it's not just one of these parallel groups that are in play, it's multiple. You've got the Ottomans now in the game, Pakistanis, Indians, Albanians, Russians. Who else? Oh, Chinese, my goodness. Chinese can't be forgotten. So they're all in that parallel game now. And the West is the one that's just getting put in the dunk tank over and over again, because the only thing they tolerate in the West are hogs that will take their grain and not get in the way of their predation. So you take the grain as a hog, you're tolerated. You want to shut down their predation schemes, you're the second coming of Satan on earth. And they'll have any type of army of white monkeys to make it look like it's not them doing it, because that wouldn't be good for them saving face. But, oh, they're the financiers of it, by the way. Oh, and it's not just them. like I said, the Ottomans, nobody, they're, you talk to somebody about Ottoman, they think you're talking about something you put your feet up on in front of a lazy boy. That's about how well informed Westerners are about the people that are dead set against them and have been since forever. But of course, they don't say that in your company. They say the opposite. Oh, we're on your side. Let's celebrate together all the things that we're getting and you're not or won't in the near future. Oh, they're not active in Africa. That's that can't be true. I mean, what's happening in Libya? We don't know what's happening there. It's too complicated. No, it's not. It's stupid easy, but it's made complicated because that's a smoke bomb. Smoke bombs, who throws smoke bombs and why and where? Well, si bono, it's not you. So just even when you see smoke, you know there's something going on that most likely conforms to that type of enrichment scheme. Snow blow the people, not in on the take. You look at Libya, I said 40 million the other day, it's 7 million. And I said maybe there's 10,000 in profit by it. I'd bring that number down to 1,000. So, country 7 million, 1,000 profiteers. Everybody else just gets to see where things fall for them, which is down. Just a massive downward spiral. To the point where, again, public sanitation doesn't exist. So just imagine all the preventable diseases just to keep public sanitation working. No, these are people smashing grabbers. They're not planning for the future. They're taking every damn cent they can, as much as they can, for as long as they can, because they're not sure they're going to be alive tomorrow. And in a lot of cases, they're right. They're not going to make it. But they're going to take a whole lot before they're stopped. And they already have. And that model can happen anywhere. Now people are saying Gabon is on the chopping block. Mali's on the chopping block. Burkina Faso is on the chopping block. Niger is on the chopping block. So you want to talk about headhunting? And you think that like all those things happening there aren't going to affect you where you are? That's an assumption. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But maybe you're wrong. Because they're, again, turning all these people into human torpedoes and then putting them on boats and sending them into Europe. It's a mass invasion. Is this a tactic the Ottomans have used before? Well, certainly they have, but we're just clueless in this modern age of let's all get along. Do you think they care about the people that they're misusing in that way? Do you think their humanity is somehow higher than Europeans that don't want to be flooded by mobs of people of unknown origin that can't be integrated in any foreseeable way into modern economies of the future? So what geopolitical players would have some benefit in doing that? Well, then again, we're looking at the Chinese, the Russians, and the Ottomans. Wow, there we go, another 3. So it's just amazing watching these things develop. I mean, definitely we're coming into a more dynamic time. Because the 80s weren't, as far as I know, as wild as this. At least we didn't have the access to the information that allows us to see stuff like this. But this is wild. We are entering wild times. Breakdown of public order in major European countries like France and Germany, Italy. So in far Western Europe, the rot war. And then we got Eastern Europe, just direct, straight up and down military operations. And the discussion was today, oh yeah, North Korea, they're not just sending artillery cells, they're sending entire brigades of Chinese troops as dressed up like North Koreans. You don't think it can happen? What happened in Korea? Do you know even? It's called the Forgotten War. I'm sure the dummies listening to this have no idea. Oh, we won that war. Never again. It's never gonna happen again. War's over, man. So, who knows? People who are running Russia have been running Russia off a cliff for decades. You think they care? You think that they think that they won't be able to manage that? That couldn't catch up with them at some point? How good of strategic thinkers do you think they are in uh, total terms? People that have completely tanked their own economy, burn up all of their relationships just to achieve some type of territorial gain. How smart? I mean, if you're going to give them an IQ, is it 100 or is it below? So what is this 5D chess that they're supposed to be playing? Now they're going to bring in the Chinese and think they're going to be able to walk away from that scot-free, when they're just a conduit for a European invasion. So, is this a world war? I think you could classify it as such. It's just, at some point, historians have to say, oh, there was an incident. Sinking of the Lusitania was the outbreak of World War I, or the entering, the final straw that broke the camel's back. And the United States had to act. Even though Wilson ran on a not getting involved a campaign. Is that he's another reason why I'm telling you that he is a failed president in my book. He domestically set the U.S. on the course that it is now, which also means that anybody that was a lawyer between him and now is just a non-entity, whether they want to realize it or not. So you care about legality, you care about civic societies, then you're going to have to just recognize that anything you did between now and then was a total waste of time and money. And again, the data shows it. It's not me saying that, it's the data saying that. I'm just telling you what the data says. And the data is there. It is insurmountable. I would love to be able to say the opposite, like, oh no, everything, it hasn't happened, but what has happened? Everything is fine. I'd love to say that. Can't do it. The data doesn't let me. Oh, and maybe a certain scientific integrity too. But again, things look bad. How many ships got sunk in the Second World War? You don't know that either, dummy. A lot of bad things happened, but the world came back one way or another. So this world will come back. The civilized world will come back, but it will be coming back without a lot of the junk that we've accumulated thus far. And when we talk of corporate culture, because I do like to come back to that, because it's sort of hard to understand the complexity of that. I mean, it's not just their Looney Tune statement of values, but it's also their hiring practices, that the entire human resources departments have been politicized. So it's not enough that you're qualified for the job. Conformity is the number one qualification, and conformity to radicalized political positions. And if you're not on board with that, they pre-screen you out. In fact, they have quotas for people that aren't like you. So you imagine you have then these big black box banks pumping in capital into stock markets, accumulating the shares, then becoming the de facto owners, then hiring the managers that implement these political policies, and then the sorting through of entire industries and socioeconomic political regions and pre-selecting for negative attributes. Again, would someone that's well-meaning do that? No, but that's the point. They have a propaganda that's trying to tell you that they're working for a utopia, but the reality on the ground is that they're just completely gutted and destroyed industries. But that is part of a geopolitical game that you don't see. It's a hostile intent that's disguised as not being that. So then imagine, so you have those people, then you have the useful idiots, and then you have the skeptics that are not a majority. You know, it's like, because you have to be pretty far seeing to see that in a way. I mean, in another way, you could just look at it on the face of it, this is idiotic, and you'd be right. But it's idiotic with intent and also with a lot of organization and capital behind it. So this is why the stock market people think, oh, I got rich on that. I'm watching my stocks. Stock market is part of this ownership capture process. So malign capital, malign mechanisms, malign actors, malign results. So that will need to be better scrutinized. Now, we had organizations that were tasked with that very important task. They failed. That's the result. So they failed. You could say it was the architecture. You could say it was the bad people. You could say it was historical circumstances. And you'd be right, more or less, on all of those things. So, but that doesn't change the situation, and we don't have to continue to fail. We can just say, this jalopy blew up. Let's walk away. Let's build another one that isn't a gas guzzler, and one that's better, more comfortable and reliable, and maybe downscaled. And we're gonna be buzzing around in that. And the jalopy, we're gonna put in a museum of horrors and say this is what late stage capitalism degenerated into, and these were the people that were behind it, and this is how they instrumentalize it. Because it's really now, right now, is it capitalism or communism? Is it Chinese characteristics, or is it just a bad governmental model? And the funny thing is you've got commies on board with this process, this globalized subversive gray zone financing and control. East Germans are in on it, former East Germans, Hungarians. You've got of course the Russians are in on it, and who knows who else? Dictators and other Lebanese central bankers in on it, probably. Or people like that. They all sort of just congregate around this new way of flipping, financing and flipping ownership and causing detrimental cultural change. So just imagine you're like a super competent engineer, but because they politicize the workplace, conformity isn't your top qualification. You're out on the street. They would literally rather have you starve to death and die than be working in their companies, because conformity is the first priority. And you say, this is crazy, but look into old communist systems, if you really do learn about that was the case then. You're super talented student, but you're not conforming on the political narrative, you're out. Maybe you get to go in the cement factory or something that requires you to beat up your body, but they're not sending you to university. That's for the conformists. That's for the people who will lie in lockstep continuously for the sake of the one party system. You don't have that qualification in air quotes, you're out. They don't want you. And they're trained to spot people that are nonconformists and not to explain to them why they're out. They don't do explanations. They just cut you and if they can make you think it was your fault, they'll leave you in the lurch like that, because what they're engaged in is a criminal enterprise. And of course they've been trained. They don't make explanations. They'll just say it was you, wasn't me, it's you. You're the problem. When we had an auditorium, you were supposed to put on your little red handkerchief and sing enthusiastically Leninist songs. You didn't show up that day. Your tie was crooked. That was the reason you're out. It's that type of principle in less ideologically apparent circumstances is how they're operating. It's just, oh no, we don't have to tell you anything. It's not like this. No, but here are these policies, and here's the implementation, and here's the result. So yeah, of course they're doing it. But it's not, the commies doing it. It's the capitalists doing it. The people affiliated with black box banks, government affiliated mandates, and the stock market, which is just facilitating this process. And of course, plausibly and denying any of that happening. Because it's about the economy, stupid. Get back to work. Real wages just falling via inflation. 25% pay cut. You get fired if you ask for 5% raise. Look how maniacally competent these macroeconomic maniacs are. See, they got beyond the communist capitalist conflict. Now they're all in on it together. So, and again, it's not just nonconformity, it's capability, it's natural leadership. See, the cheats, they know they can't win a fair competition. And they know there's a natural leadership. And so that's who they make their enemies. Because if they can get rid of them, then they can rule. And they can do it via the political blockages, but more precisely via capital ownership, which is to say, having more money. They live better lives automatically. They don't have to have a position. See, they can live from their investments. But of course, conformity on maintaining the system. So then you can think that, yeah, greedy people, greedy psychopathic people get co-opted into the system automatically. But if you don't play ball, you're out. And they do blackball people. Some people might have thought, it was about they were special persons until they crossed some invisible lines. They're disappeared. Not that they're killed, but they are fired. They're not part of the ruse. They're not part of the game. They're not going to get back in. That's also, I'm pretty sure they blackball people. Like these human relations or human resources people, they're probably networked. They have some type of database. They're also profiling people. And it's really eerie how they all have the same look. Isn't that strange? But that's also a sub-military, a below-military attack on social and economic institutions. So there's a military aspect to it as well. It's not just criminal crime, economic crime. It's across the spectrum. it's a confluence of malevolent influences and priorities. But again, not represented openly as such. So, you do have to wrap your head around that one. So it's a new type of game, there's a new type of player, new type of rules, and new types of outcomes. But again, good is good. Good leads to good outcomes, bad leads to bad outcomes. So you can reverse engineer it. So we have this bad out situation. How the hell did we get here? That's when you can start figuring things out. As far as institutional capture goes, it does bear mentioning that the arts specifically have been captured by these actors. And this might seem strange to people in the West, but it's not really to people in the East that were under some type of Soviet dictatorship, because they did the same thing there. Because you needed to go to the right schools and have the right connections and know the right people and that was way more important than any type of art, which they just regulated to some type of department of propaganda, because you're propagandizing ideas via visual forms. That it was very early on considered political and therefore politicized, which meant only certain people got to become artists or discuss art in any meaningful way or get invited to do art projects, and then they had guidance the whole way by people who knew a whole lot more about politics than they did about art, oddly enough. And so you have decades of just stupid things being done, being in the name of the arts. Whole lost decades in the Czech Republic, for example, like Prague, one of the coolest cities in all of Europe and the world, especially in the 50s and 60s, or at least it could have been. Just a void, nothing produced really of value. I mean, you might have some things, but it was basically being run by political socialites. And as oddly enough, like you would think that type of system that was so disreputed would never reappear. Well, now it's in the West. It's rich people. Because to be rich, you need to also be politically connected, which also means you get to discuss and determine what is art and artistic and artist, and nobody else does. And so you can see the atrophying of the arts, just like the atrophying of the quality of film and cinema, which more or less started in the 90s in the West. So isn't that strange? Like the fall of the Berlin Wall meant all that Eastern jazz got injected into the West. Because we're both the same. There's no division between us. We're the same, you see. But the same in terms of them determining what culture would look like. Whereas the finances, well, they'd have those geniuses in the West manage the finances for them. They'll manage the culture. And so that's where you also get to see all this very odd exchange happening between hostile countries, where their students get sent to Western universities and Westerners get decapitated. So that process happened and is happening and is still going on at this time. It might end tomorrow, but it's still tolerated despite all of the earth-shaking revelations in the last couple of months, including the beginning of a world war. Whether they're going to admit it or not to themselves. Of course, in 5 years' time, it'll be pretty much a confirmed fact, but right now everyone is living in denial. Everyone is stuck between worlds. everyone is stuck between the idea of arts and the implementation of arts via captured institutions, decapitated institutions, co-opted institutions, mismanaged institution. Now, see, why is it mismanaged? It's mismanaged from the person who's authentic about caring about the arts and the civilization and the people in which one lives. But it's not mismanagement from their point of view, which is just keeping a lock on the arts and turning into a socialite type of event where the exclusionary rich, which is to say a socially privileged, socially, politically ideologically connected blob of people, can create a new void until they collapse. But that's in an indeterminate amount of time. Until then, they'll continue to play the role of socialites amongst us, should they not be exposed or ejected. And in these cases, the easiest way is to just follow the money. If it's not them, it's their families. So their families have some type of political, economic connection. They're there trying to determine the venue or who's trying to decree who's who. Those are the people. So, put them on a list. But certainly if they're involved, there's no point in collaborating. Certainly one should look at their sincere concerns with a little bit of a jaundiced eye, especially in this late stage of exterminationism. So, okay, but just think, Czech Republic, no culture to speak of, no genuine culture to speak of from when the occupation started till the fall, and then after the fall you had this privatization, oddly enough, going on, where they westernized. So it seemed to be a mutual exchange of bad ideas, bad trends happening. So they got the crappy trend from the West, and the West got the crappy trend from the East. And then you had a unification of mediocrity, of totalitarianism, global totalitarianism. Was that the idea? The only problem is, that might look good on paper, but the implementation results in exterminationism. Whoa, what a little bad side effect that keeps getting exponentially worse, that they're going to explain away because they're a self-interested and, dare I say, culpable, guilty party. So just think in terms of the maniac murderer that keeps killing the thing he loves, right? He's not going to admit that he's in a terroristic spiral. He's going to deny that it's happening. He's going to close himself off. He's going to isolate himself, and he's going to surround himself with fairy tales and dodge or censor the data. That's what a maniac murderer does, and that's what countries do that are run by maniac murderers on some level, or overly maligned, influenced by them. That's their malign influence, and that's the result. So, and there is a causality. It's not rocket science to figure it out who is responsible for what, with or without shell games. And they do like shell games. But ultimately, the results are the results. Now, everyone wants great art, but they don't. So that's the problem. That's the a priori problem. So, and it also, what's happened to England, again, in the last 10 years, the whole development has gotten precipitously worse, with no end in sight. Just things reverting to failed state. type of conditions. And people might say, oh, you're over-exaggerating, Sudan is a lot worse. Well, trajectories are trajectories. Data is data. I love pointing people to Gabon and Libya and saying, study all that and then come back and say the same thing's not happening in other places of the world because you're wrong. There, it's easier to see. It's on display. They don't have as much artifice, or they don't have the cover of centuries of civilizational success to point to. That again, the people taking it, subverting it from the inside, they hide behind these facades. They have been perfectly hidden in civilized countries until finally, again, some people, based on what we're seeing, it just said, F it, you're absolutely wrong. We are parting ways here. All these people that are cooked up high on hope, what the hell is hope? Let hope go. Let hope die. Don't need damn hope. Hope is for dopes. So they were sing-songing that, hey, we're gonna turn this around and you're gonna become wealthier than ever, and on and on and on. Well, the data doesn't back them up. But they do like closing trade deals with authoritarian countries that have a lot of friends there, apparently. So how far away are they from a global despoty? How many of them have funded it or are involved in it? We don't know. We don't have any type of public access to those matters. We just get to see what manifests itself in our time. But of course we're taught to question what we're seeing, because it couldn't possibly be true that we've been hijacked by malign influences. That couldn't possibly happen. I mean, that a bank somewhere got taken over from the inside. Couldn't have happened. Never happened. Never could happen. Of course not. It's beyond belief that something as plausible as that happened. So, but again, as terrible as a murder mystery is, and the murder victims, finally, it's a stupid crime that has stupid results and can be remedied in a heartbeat when certain right actions are made. Because that's the other thing. But government is not a freaking mystery. It's not, I can't understand this. It's all so complicated. Boil it down to the simplest of things. People came up with governments out of the dirt and slime. The literal horseshit of the plains. Stacked a couple of stones on top of each other. This is the government here. These are the horsemen with the swords. You're going to chop your head off if you don't follow the rules type of process. Hit or miss. Mostly miss. Sometimes hit. And just because you hit a couple times doesn't mean it's going to continue the streak. Depends on who's hitting what. And with inverted institutions, inverted managerial systems, what do you get? What gets hit? The good gets hit. What grows? The bad grows. Good shrinks, bad grows. Very simple, very abstract, very dispassionate. I'm all for dispassionate. People getting worked up about things. I was promised this. I was promised that. You weren't promised anything. You could have died in the grave like billions of other kids due to a variety of reasons. But whether or not you compromise on basic principles, basic morals, that is up to you. And so if the highest cause of death is homelessness in Oxford, for example, like you have more chance of dying of homelessness than any other thing, that does say something, doesn't it? That maybe the place is rooked and the rookers are out in the open with a line of blarney for anything that's thrown at them at any time from any direction. So possible. It's not this world isn't as just and fair and accomplished as you may have been led to believe. It can happen at any time, anywhere, and it does. No one is immune, no one is perfect. No one is completely impervious to attack, especially the most malicious and deceptive kinds. But what is malicious and deceptive? This is a big world, there's a lot of people in it, and they don't like each other, and they will not get along, no matter what you say or do. You want to throw yourself in between two tanks just because you're an idealist, you're not only not going to accomplish anything, you're going to get hurt in the process, possibly fatally. But again, there's a lot worse things than dying homeless in Oxford, and certainly as far as spiritual resilience goes, that you're either ascendant or descendant. And there's no excuses in that realm where you bear for full responsibility. So for the people profiting off of these systems, you're not going to end up in a good place finally. And for the people that don't profit, well, isn't that a normal thing, not to profit from bad things? But what is profit? And where can one go? But what is skillful homelessness look like versus unskillful homelessness? That might be sort of a practical area to research, like home economics was 60 years ago. Because there was going to be a home and there was going to be economics. Well, now there's homelessness on the agenda. And let me tell you, home economics, that was a great class. It's awesome. Most practical things probably I ever learned in my life were in that class. So don't think learning about homelessness is a slap in the face. You know what's a slap in the face is being homeless and not knowing the first thing about how to survive. That's a slap in the face. That's more than a slap in the face. And so that's also the future that they've planned for you. And a lot of you aren't going to escape it, even if you think you will. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that didn't think it would hit them. But this is what macroeconomic policy translates into. So don't think you're going to dodge it forever. Skillfully prepare. And if it's not the economy and these mandarins, it's war. Just artillery shell or drone coming out of nowhere and boom, your wonderful house. Or how about this? Criminal cops, corrupt people, bush dwellers. 10 bush dwellers show up, you're driving a truck. One of them takes a monkey wrench and busts you in the face, because the whole plan is to hijack what you're trucking, because that's how they live day to day. So how you're going to live after having your face, your eye socket caved, that's up to you. I don't know if the company's going to pay for that. And going through life with one eye, it's a little different than going through life with two. But it can be done. So stop. The time for naivete, it died. It died with COVID-19. It died. So if you're still naive, you're just in the way. Give up hope and start looking at things with clear eyes.